just like a mama used to make.
Welcome back to the channel. Today I got an Edison deck profile of Hero Stun. That's not Hero Beat because I'm not going to play Miracle Fusion since the rise of combo decks in the format have really given way to the lack of Dust Tornadoes since control decks are kind of weaker right now. So I decided to play a version of like Little City revamped for the modern format of Edison. So let's just get right into it. So obviously we start off with our Stratos. Stratos is the searcher for your other main three monsters, and that would be 3 Neos Alias. Neos Alias is just a normal monster. You never really Gemini summon unless you're trying to flex on your opponent. But the big thing is he's light 1900, and he's a warrior, so it's searchable with Rhoda as well. And E-Call is a great card in this format, so you can always search these cards easily. We play a lower monster count as well, so you don't really need to play a lot of monsters since these are easily searchable in the deck. Our last monster we're going to play here is Thunder King Ryo. This is just a great card in general. It's a light 1900 attacker. Although it's thinner, you can't search it. Its effect is excellent. You contribute it as cost to negate a inherent summon, so like a Synchro Summon, Judgment Dragon, Dark Arm Dragon, these kind of things, Cyber Dragon. But the secondary effect is a continuous effect that says neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand, which outside of E-Call you're not really going to use. I guess a Rhoda too, but you're not going to use that effect. And also since we're going to play Skill Drains, which you'll see later, that effect won't apply. But the tributing to negate a summon still applies since it tributes itself off of the field and Skill Drain only negates face up cards on the field. And my last monsters that is supporting, I never really attack with these guys, is Honest. Because all of these monsters that I'll be using right now are light, this card is extremely effective. You just boost over anything that is a threat. The only one that would be a problem for you is Colossal Fighter, but ideally you're not going to be attacking into that. You're going to have a lot of back row hate to kill that card. And also, just in general, your opponent's going to have a hard time getting through all this stuff to even make the Colossal Fighter. So that's all the monsters we're going to play here. Seems like a low count, but trust me, you're not going to want to draw monsters. Once you get 1 or 2, you're pretty good to go. There's a lot of search cards as well. So for the spells, we're going to go with 3 Upstart. I know this is it's not common. I wanted to have an original high rarity deck for this format, but the supers I believe weren't out at the time, but I couldn't find my other supers or my other Upstarts. So anyways, Upstart Goblin. We're just using this as a deck thinning card. The less cards, you just want to see more traps. Consistency to getting to this specific traps that stop certain decks like Oppression or Skill Drain, or maybe there's some type of like, you're playing against another back row deck, you're going to want a negation card. So that's what this is for. The life points don't really matter since your guys are huge and it's basically 5 attacks and you win. 1 Typhoon, you're just going to use this when you need to go in and they have a back row. Let's just say I don't have a Gemini Spark or something and I summon my Alias. They might have a bottomless, so I'll just Typhoon the back row. Future Fusion target, if they're playing Necro Valley, that's also good. Also, just in general, like having a card in the back row when they MST or Dust Tornado, if they have that, it's possible to hit this thing, which you can just chain. So just good at 1. You don't really need more, especially with the combo decks running around. 3 Gemini Spark. So this lets you tribute the Alias and target a card on the field and destroy it. The tributing is a cost, so you summon Alias, they play Bottomless Trap Hole, you chain Gemini Spark and choose another card to destroy. This is also excellent for attacking into deep prisons because you can dodge it with Gemini Spark. You can also pop set monsters if you don't have a way to stop their flip. For example, a Raikou, if you think it's a Raikou, you could just Gemini Spark it, and then you draw a card after you destroy a card, which is excellent. It just replaces itself. And lastly, we have 4 searchers. We have the reinforcements of the army and 3 E-Call. This is all just to get your monsters. By turn 2 or 3, you're definitely going to have one of these in your hand plus another monster, so you're good to go. All you need is 1 Alias in the grave to start your combos, start recursion with Hero Blast and stuff. So that's all I'm playing. I'm not playing the Miracle Fusion. I personally don't like that, and the only reason I don't like that is because my favorite deck of Teledad was Little City Hero Beat kind of thing. So for me, Miracle Fusion is just it's not my jam. I like the control. I like to just summon the big dude and punch. So that's all the spells I have. And for back row, we have a 3 Dark Bribe and 1 Solemn Judgment. Now these cards are just to negate Heavy Storm, a crucial MST maybe, and then occasionally some other things like if I need to attack for game, I know I can secure the attack with Dark Bribe or Solemn over a Deep Prison, or perhaps a Future Fusion, or a Miracle Fusion if I don't have a negation or some type like that. I have these 4 cards, but mainly you'll set 1 card or so until you have a Dark Bribe or Solemn Judgment, then you'll set up a bunch of cards once you have that secure stuff, because we're not going to play Starlight Road since Oppression can stop your own Starlight Road. Next we play Trap Dust Chute. It's just good to know what you're going to be playing against, what you're going to be attacking into, what you're going to be facing back row wise. Just an excellent card, and you can always take away a card that that is going to threaten you. So for example, if they have a bunch of cards but one of them is a Raikou and you don't have a skill drain or something like that, it could be dangerous for you, so you could just remove the Raikou because you don't really care about the monsters that they're going to summon, since they're weaker than, I think every monster will be weaker than Thunder King or Alias unless they're main decking a Cyber Dragon. Play a Torrential. We play a low monster count, so sometimes you'll summon a guy, Gemini Spark, and you'll have nothing. Your opponent will use that as an advantage to try and push, since we're probably only going to have like 1 Bottomless or something like that, and you'll just be able to hit them with a Torrential Tribute. It's also good too when your opponent starts setting a bunch of cards, maybe they have some spies or whatnot, and you can just summon your Alias, and you can activate this and then chain a Gemini Spark and still clear their field. Next we have 2 Compulsory. Compulsory is just an excellent card to get rid of any Synchro card or a Absolute Zero. This card is also just great for pushing for game. If your opponent continuously sets, you can just Compulsory that card, but also it's good for saving your own cards if you don't have a way to, like, let's just say I don't have Gemini Spark and I only have 1 Alias, I can summon it and they play Bottomless or Deep Prison when I attack, and you can chain this and put it back in your hand because you're not going to get OTK'd with the amount of back row that you have. Play Mirror Force, pretty standard. It's a good card, excellent versus dragons. Play 2 Deep Prison. Deep Prison's also an excellent card. It's a removal for anything that's too difficult to deal with. You can just remove like Stardust Dragon or Colossal Fighter. And then also just a spot removal here and there. Your opponent won't really see it coming. Maybe they get desperate, they need to crash into something, and you can just Deep Prison it, which is extra painful for them. You don't need to play 3 since you're playing large monsters. You're not really going to need 3 of these, since your opponent generally, unless they're playing a big deck like maybe Heroes or Absolute Zero deck in particular, or a Synchro Spam deck and you didn't have a back row for it, then you'll need these, but like most of the time Alias is just too big. Then we play 2 Bottomless. Bottomless Trap Hole is excellent. Removes anything that threatens you, but also just like key cards can be banished so that they can't be brought back, or Pot of Avarice or anything like that. And then because we play a low monster count, it allows us to play 3 Hero Blast. Hero Blast returns an Alias to your hand and destroys a monster with less attack than it, which is excellent because it's interrupt, but also it gets back a monster. Since we play a low monster count, we're going to need those monsters back. That's another reason why it's okay for you to attack into like a set Raikou, let your Alias die or something like that, because you do want 1 in the grave for the Hero Blast interruption and also recursion of your monsters. And lastly, we're going to play 2 Skill Drain and 2 Royal Oppression. So Skill Drain is important because it negates literally anything that could kill your back row in the monster realm, like for example, a Spy into a Descendant or a Raikou. You can also use Skill Drain to stop like Monarchs, for example. It's a very good card. There's a reason why it's at 2. And it doesn't affect you in any way whatsoever except for summoning Stratos and the adding cards Thunder King effect. And Royal Oppression is to just maintain that control. Your opponent's not going to be able to summon over your 1800 or 1900 guys while you have Royal Oppression, since it generally requires special summoning. And then you have tons of protection with these 4 cards to make sure that these continuously stun your opponent, allowing you to keep pushing for game. Just basically, when you see like one of these negations and one of these kind of cards, and then you get a Compulsory or a Hero Blast off, like the noose just gets tightened. There's not much they can do, and they slowly start having to do desperate plays, which leads them into falling into like other stun cards, like a Compulsory, a Bottomless here and there, just because you're getting so screwed, and you cannot summon, you cannot add, you cannot use an effect, you cannot special. If you attack me, I have cards to stop that. Like I have Honest, I have these 3 traps. Like it's like you're slowly strangling your opponent till eventually they have to concede. So that's all the traps we're playing. Like I said, this is a stun deck, not a combo deck, not a Absolute Zero Miracle Fusion deck. So that's the reason why there's so many traps there. For the side deck, pretty straightforward. I couldn't find my common rivalries, but this is an excellent card for against monarchs. Anything that synchro spams is also very good. You're going to look to put it into, like, for example, Flame Bell Spy deck. You might want it against what the heck is that deck called? Junk deck. Things like that. It's just a good deck overall. It just locks them into one thing. Next, we're going to put in Starlight Road. So against Blackwings, Oppression is not as good because Vayu goes through Oppression. The only one that you would really want to hit is Blizzard, but if they're going to summon Blizzard and one of your billion back row doesn't stop it, well, you're already probably dead, so this is good for the Icarus attack. It's very important that you get that off, but if you have Royal Oppression in your deck, Royal Oppression, any player can use it, so it could negate Starlight Road. On the side, 1 Dust Tornado. This is just good against other back row decks. You might also want to put it in against, like, something that your opponent's going to side into a bunch of back row, so you might want to put in Dust Tornado as well. You could, like, chain to their Dust Tornadoes to pop something else. There's also key cards in some decks that you might want to hit, but also, like, just in general, like, having an extra Dust Tornado in the deck in game 2 is always pretty good. We side a 3rd Deep Prison. I like this against the dragons. I just put it in. It's also great against other hero decks and stuff like that, removing their alias or their specifically at absolute 0. You can just trade with that, let their effect go off, then summon your e-hero guy. So that's all I have for traps. I have 5 traps. The next thing is monsters. I play 1 Fossil Dino. It's just good against dragons. Skill Drain's not as effective against dragons, so I like 1 Fossil Dino. Again, we want to keep the monster count low, since the trap cards need to be there or else you're just going to get pummeled. 1 Cyber Dragon. It's good against other control decks, but as well, like hero decks, Gravekeeper. I'm just trying to think of, like, random stuff, but also obviously machines. You can contact fusion, so you're going to want 1 Cyber Dragon. But again, most of those decks, Suppression is still pretty decent. Even against Gladiator Beast, Suppression is obviously really good. So you have to just pick if you would like to put that in. But generally, I can keep Repressions in and have one of these, since this one summon's not going to break the game here. We play 1 Exiled Force. Exiled Force is an interesting card because a lot of people think of this maybe like a GOAT format style card, but this is actually excellent because it works under Skill Drain. You tribute its cost to target a card and destroy it. So I found this to be pretty useful against people who will start setting stuff, like they're going to set in Raikos, maybe they have Spies, things like that are just hard to kill, like Snowman Eater. You're just going to be able to put that in your deck, and just if you have an alias next turn, you just summon the Exiled, target their card, even if you have Skill Drain, and blow it up so you don't have to deal with the large defense or something like that, and then you'll be able to continually attack. This is also searchable by Rhoda, which is pretty good. And lastly, we for monsters, we're going to play 1 DD Crow. Now, the DD Crow is pretty good at a 1 of, since you're only going to want to see 1, and it's to stop a Pot of Avarice, a Lightsworn play, maybe a zombie play. You're not really going to need more than 1 DD Crow, since you're playing Oppression, Skill Drain. You know, you're putting in other back row hate. You're also going to just have a lot of outs to the monsters they play with the main deck traps. And for the spells, which rounds out the side deck stuff, we're going to put in 2 Super Poly. This is just I couldn't find my originals, sadly. This is just for the hero matchup. It's just convenient to take their stuff. I know I said I don't like making absolute 0, but it is what it is. I can just take their heroes and make my own, or, God forbid, the worst play possible, I have to use their absolute 0. Then I'm going to play 1 Nobleman. Again, this is just for the decks that set a lot, maybe Raikos, Hamsters, Spies, Guards, Snowman Eaters, things like this. You're just going to want to put in 1 Nobleman. Again, you don't want to be drawing these, you want to be drawing your back row, so just 1 is fine. 1 Righteous Justice, one of my favorite hero cards just because of how random it is, but it destroys back row equal to the heroes you have on the field, so you can hit multiple cards. You have to be careful of Starlight Road, since this can target 2 cards and destroy it. But if you have Royal Oppression, it doesn't matter. You can just play this card anyways. But it's just a good out to back row. People will side in Royal Decrees, maybe more Dust Tornadoes, that kind of thing. So you can summon your 1 guy. This is an MST, which is still fine because MST is at 1 for a reason, but it's obviously not a quick play. But if you have 2 guys on the field, you can just play that, pop 2, continue attacking. So you really need that game too. I side it pretty much every time. Smashing Ground is the same kind of deal with, let me just move this up a bit. Smashing Ground is the same kind of deal with Nobleman, but it's just for large monsters or either control decks or hero decks. You're just going to smash and then summon your guy and keep attacking. So just an excellent card. And lastly, Heavy Storm. Against other control decks, it's great to put in because you're not going to care if they have Starlight Road, because you're going to play Heavy Storm and have Royal Oppression and or Dark Bribe, and they'll never see it coming. So it's just an excellent card just to side in against other control decks. Yeah, so that's about it for the side deck. Again, I hope you guys are enjoying the old school rarities. It took me a while to get this. The extra deck is definitely not going to be. So I got my token. I usually put that face up on the table. Maybe they think I'm playing Gores. Generally, I'm going to set a whole bunch of back row, but if they go first, maybe, or if I have a weekend and just a few monsters, I can set one back row, and maybe they think that I have that. For level 8s, we're just going to play the generic dudes. And my Stardust, I got a little worried there. So these guys are all just the generic level 8. I'm not going to use any of these except for the singular Stardust out of Starlight Road. I never make any synchros, but you never know, just might as well have all of the options because you can. Level 7s, level 6, 2 level 5s, and oh, that's the other level 6 there. So I definitely made the wrong order there. These are just generic synchros you're going to play, but the main ones you'll probably use is one Chimera Tech Fortress for the Cyber Dragon Contact, or if your opponent is a meathead and leaves their Cyber Dragon with a machine face up on the field, and lastly the Absolute Zeros for the Super Polymerization. So that's all the extra deck. There's not much to note about this deck for playing wise. You're just going to have to play very carefully, especially around the fact that you have a low monster count. Gemini Spark is obviously the great bait card where you just summon a guy and then attack into something, and then you can Gemini Spark. But sometimes you have to make a lot of reads on what your opponent has, like a Raikou or a Spy or something, and you wouldn't want to hit that. Or some people side in DD Warrior Lady as well, but Gemini Sparking the correct cards would be the main thing with this deck. You have to make a lot of reads on what your opponent has for the back row, and sometimes, like a lot of games, if I have a bunch of back row but I can't kill whatever their set card is, but I have a skill drain or something like that, I can just summon this and just end my turn because, you know, they're going to flip the Raikou and skill drain hits them. Things to be worried about though is, since skill drain is only face up cards on the field, if you flip a Raikou and activate its effect to target a card, or let's just say, let's just do that one first. Let's just say the Raikou targets this card, and I flip Skill Drain. If they chain Book of Moon, or they chain to their effect Book of Moon, it resolves face down, so it would still destroy my card. And something similar happens to when your opponent summons a Caius, or any Monarch for that example, and I have a Skill Drain, but I use Bottomless. They still target a card, but it's negated by Skill Drain. But since I'm Bottomlessing it, it destroys and removes it from play, where it will resolve and banish my card. So you always want to ask for targets regardless, just to see what would happen, because sometimes it's better to eat the damage on your Alias to leave the Skill Drain there than to get rid of the Caius. That pretty much happens a lot with the Skill Drain, and with Royal Oppression, since both players can use it, you should be careful that if you think your opponent has an MST, you're still probably going to do it, but you'll pay 800, and then they will MST and you lose 800 and you lose your Royal Oppression. But I would say that there is other effects that are other things that can happen in the game that would be also good. So for example, if I think my opponent has a Starlight Road and I have the set and I play Heavy Storm, I don't want to flip this in response to Starlight Road, since then they could chain Dark Bribe or Solemn Judgment in a control matchup. I might just activate this so that now the effect is activating and not the card. So they have to choose to negate this right now, but they won't see the Heavy Storm coming. And then you play the Heavy Storm and they have to Solemn or Dark Bribe the Heavy Storm rather than this card. So then you have a chance to use your Dark Bribe or Solemn to negate their Solemn, and then they're extra dead because you'll pay 800 to negate their Starlight Road. They'll have to Solemn this right away, and you Dark Bribe, and then they'll activate Starlight. You play Oppression, so you pay 800, and then you wipe the field, and then you summon and set a whole new back row. It's very, very effective on just like defeating the control decks that way. I think the rest of the cards are pretty straightforward. Sometimes you can bait in the Honest effect. Maybe your opponent thinks that you have an Honest, so even if they have a stronger guy, you might summon this guy, and if you have a 2 cards in hand or something, you just end your turn. But you really have to like put on a show, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't just like put down like, yeah, whatever, man, go. Like it's just like you put it down, you're like, yeah, go ahead, you know, it's not a big deal. That kind of stuff. But mainly just the reading. The Skill Drain and the Oppression thing is pretty straightforward if you're an old school player, but if you're new to the Edison format, that's exactly what you're going to need to know for playing this deck. Yeah, so that's Hero Stun. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck profile.